Okay,
No.
from Nick. He says, I want to get a power meter on my mountain bike, and I ultimately want to use it for pacing mountain bike marathon races. Smart choice, eh, Alex? He says, however, I'm not sure how to use it on regular rides. I do my structured work indoors and go for mountain bike rides ranging from 2 to 5 hours. And these rides are unstructured, and mountain bike data is usually more scattered than road riding. So other than, and this is a super common objection to using power on a mountain bike, right? Like I think we've all heard this from numerous different sources where people are like, oh, well, since power bounces around on a mountain bike, who cares? You can't even use it. So untrue. So he says, other than pacing races, but we're still going to talk about pacing races, by the way, and perhaps doing structured work outdoors, how can I make the most use of a power meter on my mountain bike? So it's probably best to talk about why power data on a mountain bike is useful, period. And then we can go into the rest. Pete, do you want to kick us off on that? Like how you use power data from your mountain bike?
Yeah, I enjoy power data. And my rule of thumb is I would much rather have it and not use it than need it and not have it. So if you have access to a power meter, right? If you have access to a power meter and you do look at power data for some things in your life and you understand that, it's really hard for me to understand why you would purposely not have it. And the one thing that's been really insightful to me as someone who's ridden a lot of things with power in their lives, and then getting a mountain bike and having a power meter on it, was that the RPE for me is so different based on the power numbers I'm doing on a mountain bike and the power numbers I'm doing on a road bike. The RPE is very similar, but the numbers are not the same. And so that shows probably my lack of abilities in technical climbing and traction and things like that. But at the same time, it's really insightful to know that a really hard mountain bike climb for me is not the same as a really hard road bike climb, when I can just sort of hone in and just spin my legs in little circles as fast and hard as I can. And so, but the same thing, it's really fun to see how your power data compares, and just have it, and don't change anything yet, right? Like, record data for a while. It's the same. It applies to almost all things in life. If you're not measuring it, you can't make a positive change without just making something up and hoping for the best. So if you're recording data and then you look at it and then you start making small tweaks, you can actually capitalize on having it. But if you're just one of those people that says, it's pretty spiky when I'm on my mountain bike, I probably don't need it today, it just seems like you're leaving something on the table to me.
Mm-hmm. Alex, how about you? Your power's one of mountain biking power meter's greatest proponents, I would say. How do you use it?
I don't have a bike without a power meter. I'll start with that. So I'm very biased in the realm of power meters. I think, to Pete's point, it's great if you have it. I don't know why you wouldn't run it, even if you're running it in the background to look afterwards. And I'm probably going to regret saying this, but probably the only reason I could ever see 30-second smoothed power being helpful, if you really don't like it spiking all over the place. Normally it spikes up, but it comes back down. So like, it levels out. Like, I still use a power meter to gauge my climbs, and on mountain bikes, I find it more often to hold me back. Like to Pete's point, it's really easy to find a technical climb or a really steep gradient and stuff like that. So it's really easy to go like overpower on endurance rides and stuff like that. But it all evens out, and I use normalized power a lot just to kind of tell me, like, for the ride with the climbing and the descending. Another trick I use is my average power on my screen for my mountain bike doesn't include zeros, because I hate having this huge anxiety when I get to the bottom of a descent and it's like 180. So
it's dropped down a bunch from the coasting time.
Because I know myself, and I'll just go ride 300 until it says endurance pace again. So if I do it without zeros, and the time that I'm pedaling, it says I'm in the endurance zone, then I'm good to go. And then normally the normalized power kind of works itself out. If I do that, it's normally about the same as well. So.
Another way too is for you've talked about this plenty of times, and with calorie estimation too, because that's
absolutely.
If you don't have a power meter, you're doing a hop, skip, and a jump, I would say, to get to those calorie numbers. Whereas with the power meter, you have a much more direct measurement.
Yep. The room for error is a lot less with the calculation based on watts. Obviously, it's based on efficiency, but if you move that needle, you're going to be, I think it's plus or minus 5% on the KJs anyway, whereas the heart rate is wildly variable. And we talked about this before. Some people's max is like 220 and some people's max is 150. So it's like them both working at 150, they're not going to burn the same amount of calories. So it's really helpful for that if you are tracking intake. It's, I don't see a reason not to run it if you have it. And I would highly suggest running it. I mean, I ride my mountain bike on the road too. So if you have one bike to rule them all, as you see, as you get older, you get wiser. Now Pete wants to ride mountain bikes. So everybody, mountain bikes are the way. They go just fine on roads.
This is the way.
It's actually very true. They can ride on road, whereas the other way they cannot. I actually want to combine kind of both of what you said here. Like power has been really helpful in helping me tie in fatigue points. So a lot of the time, I'm sure that everyone's experienced this. You've been in a race and or in a season of racing or something like that, and you keep missing the moves, or you're just too tired by the time that thing comes along, whatever that big move is, or course feature, something like that. And power has been really helpful for me to figure out my fatigue points, or like what triggers the sort of fatigue that disqualifies me from being a player in the race. And many times what that means is like, and this is like, you can use the interval search feature on TrainerRoad too, but like, it's when I spike over 600 watts. And if I do that too much, then that really starts to hurt me, right? This is just an example. Or it's like when I spend, where it's like, if I spend 30 seconds over 300 watts and I do that repeatedly over and over, in other words, trying to close gaps or responding to attacks when I could let somebody fill in front of me. Or on a mountain bike, it's when you come to those little steep sections and you jam it every time out of the saddle instead of just sitting in and trying to stay consistent up them. And you'll actually look back and you'll start to see trends where like, okay, I really start to feel terrible and I lose my performance potential when I do X, Y, and Z leading up to this. And if you don't have an objective way to measure your performance, then you're purely going off of subjective measures for that. So here's an example of how that can be misleading. You could say, oh, well, it was super windy that day, so I must just be bad at riding in the wind. But since you don't have a way of measuring that, you don't know that actually it's not the wind. It was just the fact that since you ride 1 foot off of everybody's wheel instead of riding very close to it, you're always carrying 20, 30 watts more, right? And now you can actually see the wattage increase and you can see what the problem is. In mountain biking, it's so common. Nobody thinks twice about standing up and surging up something, which it's not a problem unless you're on the rivet, right? Like when you're really close to your line and if you do any more, then it's going to lights go out and you blow out the back and check engine light comes on. That's when those little standing up sections and you surge up that little rise, that has to be governed. You can't do that because if you do that, that means your race is over. So with a power meter, you can actually see what the cost is of that. Whereas when you're doing it otherwise, that little surge, when you go up it doesn't feel like much until 30 seconds later. And then you really start to feel tired. So it's really good in kind of figuring that out. And repeatability is a huge thing where that's impossible to quantify, really. Like you can say, yeah, well, when I do 30 seconds all out and then 30 seconds off, I do 30 30s. And by the 10th, I'm always tired. If you're just going off heart rate, that's really tricky. Or if you're just going off of any other sort of metric, but with power, you can know that it's like, okay, well, it's actually when I surge over X watts and I do that in close succession, that's where I start to fall apart. So those are ways that I use my power meter outside of pacing, outside of racing, to identify those things. And I do that all the time. It's not like a one-time thing. All throughout my training process, I find new weaknesses that are unfortunately very surprising. So that's like, that happens all the time. I'm going through and using that. How about you, Ivy? And maybe we can even like tie in cross and everything else too, since you've done a fair share of that.
Yeah. I mean, apart from, using a power meter as a tool to identify your weaknesses and measure things like repeatability, I find that having that information after an event gives me a lot of confidence to carry into my training and into the next race when I can see an objective measure of what I've done. where alternatively you can look at the strengths and repeatability of your effort and carry more confidence. It's a big mental tool for me. And while each discipline is different, like for cross, it's really hard to look at your power meter when you're racing. And I know a lot of athletes don't, but it can be used as a tool depending upon the course. Like I know a lot of athletes that will set like a normalized power and check each lap through the start finish, for example, to make sure they're not, reaching a ceiling that will potentially put them in a hole. Because I know that I struggle with pacing. Like the first few laps are always far too spicy for me. So I probably should, start using that as a tool.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing about. Let's talk about the pacing side, even though I apologize in this case. In this case, Nick, you said other than pacing races, but we're going to talk about it here. I feel like there's this misunderstanding out there that exists. So like a great example is Pogacar when he did his time trial at the end of the Tour de France this year. And there were like, people were like, he didn't even use a power meter. Like, that's amazing. The power meter. And like, there's this assumption that like, because he didn't use a power meter, he was able to perform like he did. And it's a power meter never is going to somehow make you outperform yourself. It's never going to make you perform better than you physically can. Like, those are your physical limits. And in more cases, often than not, what it does is it just holds us back. Like, it doesn't pull you further along. It holds us back because our eyes are always bigger than our stomachs. So when you talk about pacing, and particularly about like that example of like Pogacar and that sort of a thing, he's a sort of athlete that who knows how many thousands of hours that athlete has training by power, by prescription, knows his body extremely well, that sort of a thing, something entirely different. And if he had his power data, I doubt that he was going to be sticking perfectly to a digit as much as using that data to inform his perception and going throughout it, right, on how he trains. However, power does not enable you to somehow outperform yourself. And it also doesn't hold you back from performing yourself, or it shouldn't. If you have a properly paced power goal, it's a fantastic tool for pacing. And in almost every case, it just caps us. And that's how we get faster, is instead of using up all of our energy, then blowing up and going slow, it's a better way to make sure that we kind of keep it even. And whether that's for the whole race, you have a normalized power goal. Like for myself, I'll know that at this elevation, I can probably hold a normalized power of this for this 90-minute cross-country race. So if I look down at that race and I'm one lap in, and I'm like way over that, I need to calm down because I'm going to blow up and I'm going to completely ruin my race. And that's very common. Or you can even look at it like per section in cyclocross. Like there's those tight sections with a bunch of turns that you'll have where it'll be like back-to-back turns. And it's actually, even though you have coasting time, it's really easy to blow yourself up in those sections because out of every turn, you're accelerating really hard, right? Even if and then on the opposite side of it, it could be you get into you just have a course and you have a lap like Tulsa Tough, for example, with a really hard climb in it. And you know that if you're going through that and your normalized power is spiking way too hard every lap, kind of like Ivy was talking about, your race is going to be short-lived. So like, you can have that normalized power cap that you can use, but then I guess at other times too, it can be a reach. Some days you're feeling rough and that goal kind of reminds you of what you're capable of, and you can then weigh whether you want to reach for that or not. Like a time trial is a good example of that. Like, Pete, do you use power when you're in a breakaway to be able to moderate effort?
Yeah, I was going to say it's funny. One of the funny things about normalized power is it kind of matters how you're putting down the power and how the rest is coming at you. And it's something that everybody should sort of know about themselves. Like, your normalized power cap is mine is 10% above my FTP for the same amount of time, most of the time for most races. And that's because I'm pretty efficient and my body really likes those small recoveries. But if you're not, depending on your physiology, if you do really well with longer rests, sometimes the normalized power cap will be closer to your FTP. And that's something just through exploration and testing. And one of the crazy parts about breakaways is you probably have to go too hard. You probably want to go above your normalized power cap if you want your breakaway to succeed, and then you hold on. But
it's
most
like
of the time,
an initial hardness, and then after that you settle in, right?
Yeah. And so to get away and to make sure everybody's working together and everybody's taking, or by yourself, you have to go really hard. So it is nice to know that you're going hard enough. And it also is nice to know that after you kind of get away, you can settle back in and you've already used a bunch of energy at the right time to get the distance between you and whoever's chasing. But yeah, I think depending on the breakaway and depending on the course, make sure that you know that if you're only getting if it's like a 4-corner crit and you're only getting 10 seconds of rest per lap, that's not, your normalized power is going to be different than if you're doing Crybaby Hill on Tulsa Tough and you're coasting for 30 seconds a lap. You kind of have to weigh that into the equation too. So pay attention to what your normalized power looks like per course, and then you'll be able to maximize how you're spending that energy a little better.
Nice pro tips, Pete. 2 other things come to mind for this before we move on to the next one. Training stress. If you want an accurate representation of your training stress, then power is the best way to get that. So that's another reason that it would be useful to you outside of the context of pacing. And then the other one too is PRs. Now you actually have a measurable way to measure your performance, like we've been talking about before. So without that, you don't get it. And it's always frustrating too even though power meters are getting like a lot more achievable, like 4eyes, I think you can get them for like $300 in the US if you send in your power or your crank arm to them. Like that's much better than it used to be. But still, they're expensive. But it is always frustrating. I'm sure you've all experienced this. Alex, like he said, has a power meter on every bike. But I've had bikes where I don't have a power meter on that, and I'm always wondering, like, oh, maybe actually I have some PRs from that. I don't know if I do or not. And it's always like a question mark in the back of my head from when I was riding that bike. So
this whole conversation has me thinking that there needs to be a metric for matches left. Like it's like the beers, like calorie thing. Like you need a head unit that's just like you have 5 matches left.
I know, right? Yeah.
You get down to 1 and you're just like, uh-oh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Basically like a sailboat without a sail at that point. You're stuck.
If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up.
If you didn't like this video, you can give it a thumbs down, but let us know what you would have done differently in the comments below.
If you want to see more of these videos, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, check out TrainerRoad.com.
Do it.